Hey there, I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I welcome you to this episode of Mythic Mind Games as we continue our Fallout series, this time heading over to New Vegas. Now, as I mentioned in the last episode, this series that we're doing is these are mostly kind of off the cuff, casual conversations about the Fallout games and eventually about the Fallout show. And in this case, especially dealing with 3, dealing with New Vegas, we're dealing with games that are important to me and that I have good experiences with, that I have not played in a number of years. And so these are not necessarily deep dives into the lore and philosophy, although I mean, we do that, but I guess it's not as deep as it could be. That's what I want to say here. Take that for what it is. Now, I'm enjoying these conversations, and fortunately, Ian, my conversation partner, did come with some notes that helped to guide this conversation into some more substantial areas. But next year, I intend to do a full run through the franchise and spend some time doing more deep dive analysis with a whole study, with an entire study called Fallout and Philosophy. So make sure that you're subscribed to Mythic Mind Games podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, and more information will come out on that eventually. But that's something I'm going to run sometime in 2026. But for now, I hope that you enjoy our conversation on Fallout New Vegas. Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind Games, an extension of the Mythic Mind Fellowship, which pursues wisdom on the paths between primary and secondary worlds. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. Welcome back as we continue with our Fallout series, now with New Vegas, joined today by Ian. Unfortunately, some of the others had to drop out, but hey, I think we've got everything we need right here. We've got good conversation coming. I've got my Nuka Quantum here, um,
I
ready to
just
set the
have
mood.
tea.
Well, to frame the expectations of this conversation, I should say that this won't necessarily be super deep dive into lore and philosophy, although, Ian's got some notes here. Hopefully, we'll be doing some of that. But this is a game that I know I haven't played for several years, despite the fact that it probably is my favorite of the franchise, favorite game. And
Definitely.
I'm definitely not alone in that. It tends to be a fan favorite. And I've heard some rumors. Apparently, maybe they're substantial that there might be a remake coming. Three seems more solid for that, but just recently, I've heard from some of the leaks that seem to be have about as much substance as the Oblivion leaks had, coming out before that remaster. So I don't know, we'll see. But either way, this is a game that I think is worth talking about, even if we're mostly pulling from memory here. Ian, I guess I'll start by asking, what is your experience with this game?
My experience with Fallout probably started in 2008 with Fallout 3. And I really liked that game at the time. I still have a lot of fond memories of wandering the wasteland in Fallout 3 that I hold near and dear to my heart. Overall, my feelings on Fallout 3 just like generally as a game have kind of cooled somewhat. I've definitely taken much more of a shine to New Vegas, which I played. I played New Vegas on release, and really enjoyed that as well. Definitely appreciated it a lot more when I was older. I didn't have as much fun wandering the New Vegas wasteland as I did the Fallout 3 wasteland. And I think that's not necessarily an accident because Bethesda in general are very, very good at building sandbox worlds that are like fun to romp around in and explore. New Vegas has got a fantastic world. I want to make that abundantly clear. But New Vegas was created by Obsidian Entertainment as opposed to the actual Bethesda published it, but they didn't develop it, right? So it was developed by Obsidian. Obsidian has always been known for their strong writing, which lends itself more towards philosophy, actually. So the older I got, the more I appreciated New Vegas and its world for that. But that's kind of the crash course there.
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of potential there. Now, as I've said in other contexts, at some point in 2026, I want to do a full run through all the Fallout games and do more of a deep dive Fallout and philosophy, like what I'm doing with the Elder Scrolls material. I think that there's a lot of potential there, but I just need to spend more time revisiting and more time thinking about these things. But yeah, I agree that New Vegas particularly lends itself to that kind of discourse. Maybe it'd be worthwhile just rehashing the very basic plot of this game for people who haven't visited for a while. So it starts off very different than the other Fallout games in that you're not a vault dweller, you're not a relative of a vault dweller. You are somebody from the wasteland. You are a courier tasked with bringing this platinum chip to the strip. But as the game gets started, or I guess right before the game gets started, you get shot in the head a couple times, which tends to put a damper on things. So
Just a little bit.
Right. So somehow you survive, and your body is, I guess, pulled out of the shallow grave by
Yeah.
Victor, this robot, Securitron, and he brings you to Doc Mitchell, patches you up, and eventually you kind of follow the trail back to the strip or to the strip where eventually you do encounter Benny, the guy who shot you and took the chip, and you have various choices at this point, but not long after that you get introduced to Yes Man, his robot Securitron that he's very affirming, hence his name. And he was originally part of Benny's plan to take over the strip, take over New Vegas, which is only still standing in as much as it is, thanks to the protection provided by Mr. House, who brings
And the
us
Hoover Dam,
and the Hoover Dam.
which
Yes.
everybody wants.
Yes, yes. Mr. House brings us back to the pre-war era, which I like that we have such direct connections to the pre-war era here. House, who was the CEO of Robco, and he was one of the main kind of capitalist players in this era, directly leading up to the bombs dropping. And so he manages to protect at least a portion of Vegas, along with himself, obviously. He kind of connects up with some of his life preservation technology, eventually through his mental ingraining in his system, right?
He's basically the wizard in the tower.
Yes, yes,
Like somebody
exactly.
pointed that out to me once, and I've never gotten it out of my head. He's a wizard in his tower.
Yeah, that's a great point because I mean, but by the time that the courier shows up, by the time that the game starts, he is this sort of grand presence on a screen, and he has a lot of influence. But I mean, himself, I mean, he's this shriveled up little body in this tank being kept alive. And so yeah, and so all this kind of relates to, or the whole game is centered around what do you do? Who are you going to put into power by the end? Are you going to side with Mr. House and give him control, his Securitrons control of the strip and the dam? Are you going to side with the NCR? Are you going to side with the obviously evil Legion? Or are you just going to take control of yourself and kind of get an independent Vegas? And so these are the various ways that you can go with this, and there are all kinds of sub branches you can take within those different pursuits. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can approach this game, which I think is one of the things that really adds to replay value. Well, yes, there are choices to make in three, there are choices to make in four. I feel like there's a lot more room for maneuvering in this game, which just makes it a little bit more intricate. So that's the basic plot. Where do you think we should go from here as far as kind of specific points of conversation?
Oh my goodness, where do we even, yikes, where do we even begin? I think so. So for people who maybe watched our Morrowind video, right? We talked about how one of the strengths of Morrowind as an open world game when it comes to the design philosophy of an open world game is that you basically you make your character, you get off the boat, and you're instantly ready to play. You're instantly ready to kind of go wherever you want, do whatever you want. Uh, New Vegas takes a page out of this book by after you getting like shot in the head for reasons you don't know why. You get pulled out of the shallow grave by a robot, and then Doc Mitchell like patches you up, which is a really funny way of using the character creation. And so he's like, I don't know if I put your face together right, and then you can make whatever face you want. And he says, good enough. So that's a really fun diegetic way of you doing character creation. And then boom, You're out in the world, you're ready to play. So that's definitely one of the design strengths of New Vegas compared to say like a well, I guess I was going to say Oblivion, but probably more pertinent would be Fallout 3, where you kind of have like a whole hour's worth of being in the vault almost before you're ready to actually go out in the world and do things. You do have the good spring stuff that you kind of go through. There is an optional tutorial. You can choose to leave good springs and not worry about that at all. But if you do that, if you're playing a good person, and statistically most people do, you're probably going to stay and help out good springs with they're being attacked by the gangs.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that right at the beginning you're presented the moral scenario. I mean, do you take what's obviously the good approach and protect the town from the gangs, or do you join the gang and help them take over the town, right? That's an option as
Hmm.
well.
This is probably the first and last time in the game you will get a well, okay, that's not entirely true, but I'm going to finish the thought. Um, the last time, air quotes, that you will get an obviously good and obviously evil choice, because from there on out, the rest of the game is presenting you with really complicated and sometimes uncomfortable scenarios where it's leaving you, the player, to figure out, okay, what is justice? Either according to whatever character you're making and playing and role playing, or you can even ask yourself those same questions. And wow, what would I do in this situation, in this really hard, unpleasant situation? What is the right call? That's
Yeah,
most of the moral conundrums in the game.
yeah, absolutely. And even on the large scale of, who's going to be in control at the end. I mean, to me, it seems like I mean, it's very reasonable to say that, okay, all these actors that are trying to vie for power here, like they all have some agenda here. And, maybe better if we just maintain independence. But of course, if you do that, then everything just kind of falls into anarchy. And so, it in big or small, like, a lot of times, even the decision that seems like the right one doesn't necessarily have the consequences that you're looking for.
Hmm.
In fact, I was to say that Dave and I talked about this with Fallout 3 with the 10 penny tower
Oh
situation,
God.
where you think that, okay, maybe the good thing to do is get some peace between the ghouls and the people in the tower. But of course, if you do that, then eventually the ghouls just like kill everyone and take over. And so there's no clear boundaries regarding like what is the right course of action by virtue as well as by practicality.
Yeah, it's like, and obviously, we'll get to Caesar's Legion. Everybody, don't worry. Obviously, Caesar's Legion is, they're not great, right? But and Obsidian, I keep trying to say Bethesda and stopping myself. Obsidian, they tried at the very least in their marketing to kind of like paint a picture of more of a moral conundrum where okay, yeah, Caesar's Legion is this horrible dictatorship, but there is order and safety, like kind of like within their realm, within their sphere of influence. The problem with the game is that it's not actually a Caesar's Legion focused game. It's a very NCR focused game, and the Legion is barely in the game at all. And I think partly this is partly probably because of just just time and limitations and things like that. But they probably made the right call ultimately in the end to focus on the NCR and the problems of the NCR. But the game itself just does not give you a whole lot in the way of actually seeing what benefits Caesar's Legion may or may not provide to its people. Um, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, and I wish they portrayed the Legion a little bit differently. I wish they made it more morally justifiable, even if still
Hmm.
questionable, to side with them. Because
Yeah.
in the game, they're pretty much just monsters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're evil. They're the bad faction.
I think it's okay that they're the bad faction. Um, Rome itself wasn't exactly cute and cuddly either. Just ask the first century Christians.
Sure.
But I was listening to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. That's a favorite of mine. He was doing a series called The Celtic Holocaust. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, if you've listened to that at all, or
Mhm.
or any of that. But it was basically a two-part series, and I don't remember the details because it's been a hot minute. But the gist of the Celtic Holocaust was basically the Roman Empire's assimilation, yes, but also largely the extermination of Celtic peoples in the British Isles. They were like they as it is true that Rome brought a lot of peoples into their empire and appropriated their cultures, their holidays, their whatever. I mean, we have the historical documentation that they allowed the first century Jews to continue their religious practices, even though they were still there, they were paying taxes and all of that stuff. But just as much as Rome was doing that stuff for the people that they incorporated into their empire, they were also brutally exterminating and committing their own genocides as well. Um, so there is a level to this where it's like, yeah, it's okay I think it's okay that Caesar's legion aren't necessarily that they're not necessarily nice, that they're not, that I think it's okay that they're the bad guys, but it would be nice if they had more going for them to make them an appealing option, because as it stands they are just completely cartoonishly evil, and the only thing they have going for them is the Caesar characters, Caesar, excuse me, his philosophical monologue on quote unquote Hegelian dialectics. Um, Now, I'm sure you can probably speak to this more. Something that I kind of stumbled on within the last few months recently was that synthesis, antithesis, and thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is not something that Hegel actually does at all. And that what and his system is actually something called immanent critique, which I don't know anything about. So maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, I to kind of backtrack and come back to that. That
Sure,
I
sure.
I do agree that okay, obviously Rome, well, it didn't necessarily build its empire through diplomacy, first and foremost, right? Like it is, they are violent, they are brutal people. I mean, their main patron is Mars, the god of war, right? So they are a martial people. Um,
They thought
and
the
plus,
Colosseum was a pretty cool idea.
right. Like they were obviously a brutal people. I mean, the fact that their most iconic form of execution is crucifixion. Like they are not necessarily a nice people. At the same time, we do get things like the Pax Romana. We get a kind of peace. We get a kind of civilization. We get a kind of flourishing
Hmm.
that can only happen within a large, strong empire. Now, that being said, it's worth reminding ourselves that the Legion in Fallout is not Rome. This is
No,
post-apocalyptic Rome, right? And so we should expect that they would be
this is
worse than Rome.
this is a LARPer's idea of like what he thinks Rome should be, because he found like one or two burned books from the post-apocalypse.
Correct. And so we should expect that whatever Simosis has to Rome, it's going to be well, it's just
Like
that it's a LARPer,
these are
right?
like these are the people, like if you remember from Fallout 3, and I loved this by the way. These are the people who like thought like that there's like the museum in Washington D.C. where the robot is like, "Oh, and then George Washington flew to Britain, presumably he went to Britain presumably by plane,
Right.
you know, and gave the king the Declaration of Independence." Wait a minute, hold on a minute.
Which I mean, it's kind of a funny commentary on
It,
the
it
things that we
is.
think we know of history, especially ancient
Hmm.
history.
Oh
Right.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's important to keep in mind that I can't remember Kaiser's real name all of the sudden. It's some really just like
A
underwhelming
basic name,
normal
yeah,
dude
yeah.
name. I can't remember what it is. But we have to remember that this character is living in that world in that context. So he does it. I mean, he does not have a real understanding of what Rome is at all. And apparently he doesn't know who Hegel is either. But something that somebody pointed out, like we're putting Hegel off again. Something that somebody else pointed out, like to me years ago, was that you have this weird thing with Caesar's Legion where they're kind of weirdly anti-technology in a lot of ways. But if you know anything about Rome, they loved technology. They were all about technology. They had a god of technology,
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, it's this Rome that gives us aqueducts and indoor plumbing, essentially.
right?
Like, yeah, so obviously they're very technologically focused. Now, for the Hegel move, yeah, it is true that the thesis, antithesis, synthesis model is an oversimplification of Hegel.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm not an expert on Hegel. Honestly, I don't think Hegel is an expert on Hegel. Like, if you ever, like, I even when I was majoring in philosophy in undergrad, even one of my professors went in my postmodern class said that he doesn't think Hegel understands Hegel, and I
What?
think that's
It's
pretty
so
accurate.
funny.
Like
That is
he
so
he is
funny.
so, I don't know, dense and obscure. And I say that as someone who likes Kierkegaard,
Yeah.
that Hegel is very dense, very obscure. But
I-
anyways, I mean,
yeah.
Hegel's basic view of history is that not necessarily that it takes this firm dialectical model, but that everything is progressing toward the kind of self-understanding of reason. So he's a kind of like pantheist, where he believes that history is the sort of the unfolding of God, or God increasingly realizing himself through the advancement of history, the advancement of society. Um, to the point where he believed that, of course, his own Prussian society was approaching kind of ultimate enlightenment of, as he said, in a way that only Hegel can say, is absolute thought thinking itself absolutely, right? Where like
Incredible.
divine reason is essentially coming to understand itself in Hegelian philosophy, and so he has this onward march of history. This is where we get this idea of like the right side of history, that history itself is moving in a definitive direction. And so, well, it's an oversimplification to say that we have a firm like this is posited, this opposite is posited, and now we get something in between, right? This would be the synthesis model. It said it's more of just, this is happening over here, this is happening over here, but everything is moving toward a definitive point. And so, well,
It
I
seems
would,
like a very modernist idea.
well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he is a modern thinker, right?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, and so Hegel is, I mean, what Kaiser does in Fallout when he's saying that NCR and the Legion are thesis and antithesis, which I believe is the context. I don't remember his exact quote or exact reference, but I think that's basically what he's framing with that. I mean, he's it's an oversimplification, but I think he's still making the basic Hegelian point that history is moving toward a certain point, and I am that point. It's basically
Hmm.
the
Oh yeah.
proclamation that he's making.
It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things like even if Caesar doesn't really know what he's talking about, like he's like to his credit, the man is an eloquent speaker, right? And if there's one thing history has proven is that all you have to do is be a good speaker,
Hmm.
and people will just love you for it. But he's like, this is kind of like the one point, kind of like the one and only meaningful point in the game where you get to engage with Caesar's Legion in any kind of meaningful way, and it's really really cool that that's in the game. You don't see that sort of thing in many games at all, let alone any other Fallout, any of the other Fallout. Well, I say any of the other Fallout games, Fallout 1 and 2, where probably Fallout 1 and 2 have that going on,
Yeah, I mean,
but
yeah, I can't think of any other game where Hegel is directly referenced, or
no,
any
yeah.
major philosopher really. And I think it's a good point that that rhetoric itself can go a long way, right? Saying the right things with the right level of confidence. Reminds me of C.S. Lewis in talking about what inspired the Screwtape Letters. He said that he had just listened to a speech on the radio by Adolf Hitler, and he said that he finds himself, like, even though he knows what Hitler's saying is false, he finds himself almost believing it just because of the power of his rhetoric, which is largely what led to him writing the Screwtape Letters, right, about this the demonic voice.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
yeah, and so the listening to Hitler gave him this idea for well, a kind of voice that can sound very rational, it can sound very appealing, it can sound very soothing, but ultimately is leading you to damnation. Um, and yeah, we definitely see that in a lot of so-called great men of history, and we definitely see that in Kaiser.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we don't. It's a shame that we don't get like just like anything more than that. Like even the whole all right, hang on a second. I have to check my notes here really quick. I need
Sure.
to see. David wanted me to say something. I don't remember what it was. It was oh yeah, chattel slavery is bad.
Fair enough.
Okay, we ticked that box. On the subject though, can I just say that Kaiser's slavery sucks? Like it's not even like air quotes good slavery. Like he basically takes a bunch like all we see of it is he takes a bunch of like women explicitly women and he puts like like comically huge packs on their backs like they're ox. And it's like, okay, like I know like yeah, like I know this is supposed to be awful, but like even like if you know anything about like Roman slavery, even Roman slaves had tools to do their jobs.
That's a
Like
good
and
point.
it wasn't relegated to like one like exclusively to one sex.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Kaiser's form of slavery is not so much to do anything rather than just to denigrate his subjects.
Yeah, it's very like it's so like again, Caesar's Legion is just so cartoonishly awfully just bad. And it makes me wish that there was more. I guess coming
Right.
back to that.
Right. There should be some beneficial civilization that is coming out of the Legion to make it more of a compelling force, even if they're still fundamentally bad. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It is very cartoonish. If you're going to side with the Legion, you have to just say from the beginning, I'm going to be an outright villain. Like, there's
Yeah,
no
I'm a murder
justification for
hobo.
this.
I'm
Right.
a murder
Exactly.
hobo and I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's literally that's the only reason to join the Legion.
Correct.
Not a fan of that. I was actually looking at some interesting stuff. This somebody I was watching online was making was making an interesting point that I thought was a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I'm just for want of a better word for now, I'm just gonna say I thought the point at first was like a little extreme, but then I thought, well, maybe not. And they were talking about how kind of like so what the game is doing. So they like the game like the story of the game is very much focused on the NCR, and that's fine. Because it's about the NCR and it's about the problems. Especially the problems of the NCR. You've got like dozens and dozens of characters in the game and all these lines of dialogue all talking about like either people who are outside the NCR or people who are even inside the NCR complaining about the NCR and the new California Republic and just all of the problems that it has. And it's very much like so like if Caesar is if Caesar is chasing his like weird goofy distorted idealized version of Rome. The NCR, it's definitely like a far cry from what it used to be under the character Tandy in Fallout's 1 and 2, kind of like where the NCR is kind of born. And somebody who's played those games could probably like correct me on that and fill in the details. Uh, uh, like the NCR is kind of like this decaying beast unto itself. It's stretched very, very thin, and it's very, very obvious they're not there for the people of the Mojave. They only care about the dam. They only care about the dam, and they only care about the revenue that New Vegas is bringing in. Um, and everybody else kind of falls to the wayside, right? The NCR, as this decaying beast, it is if basically New Vegas is a coin, and if Caesar's Legion is on one side of the coin, then basically what this guy was saying was that the NCR is the opposite side of the coin. And there are many ways, what he was saying was there are many ways in which the NCR, for all of its pretense, is a lot closer in practice to Caesar's Legion than even the NCR itself would like to admit. And I thought that was a bold take at first. But the more you look at the game and kind of like the characters and the quests and stuff that's going on in the game, the more that kind of makes its own degree of sense. Because you have a lot of interesting situations where, like, okay, so the NCR doesn't have they don't have the order that Caesar's Legion apparently has within its lanes, within its territory, with like the safety and the order that the Legion apparently provides. But there are a lot of stories, a lot of quests where you will interact with NCR soldiers, and NCR soldiers are actually like oppressing Mojave people. Where you have this one soldier, I can't remember where, he asks for your help, and he gets into a petty dispute with a Mojave citizen, and then he just executes the guy on the spot because he didn't like because he didn't like, screw that guy, I don't like him, I'm a soldier, I can do what I want, I'll just kill him. Or if you look at the super mutants and the super in Jacobstown, and the super mutants are a lot more like the Fallout 1 and 2 super mutants. They're not mindless monsters, they're not orcs. It was basically like, kind of like this weapons experiment by the master to make a super race of beings essentially as weapons. They're still people. They're capable of, they're capable of making decisions and rational thought and communication and all of that stuff. And one of the things you have the NCR doing is the NCR is camping outside of Jacobstown, and basically the NCR doesn't want the super mutants there. And they're just trying to find a way, they're trying to find an excuse to get rid of them by any means necessary. And they're trying to provoke the super mutants who are there. They're actually trying to like live away from people and kind of live their own life and not cause any trouble. And the NCR is trying to provoke them into hostilities so that they can justify going in and wiping out all the super mutants. It's really messed up. It's actually really, really, really messed up. Not every single NCR soldier is like a bad guy, right? There's plenty of there's plenty of NCR soldiers who are good and virtuous people. This is the complexity of the NCR. You have soldiers that are actually being taken advantage of by their own commanding officers and their own government officials, promising them resources that they're not going to get, promising them engagements or deployments that are going to be light and easy, and it's the exact opposite. There's like a whole series of quest lines where you have to help soldiers go through, like, help them process all of their trauma, like all of just like the horrible things that they've gone through as they're trying to cope in this kind of like dark and depressing world. And eh, but like when you look at like the powder gangers, right? That was a problem that the NCR created, and they're not interested in cleaning up their own mess, right? So they gave a bunch of really dangerous criminals this dynamite for labor work to create a railroad, and then the powder gangers with the dynamite were able to very, very easily take over the prison and then run over the area. That's an NCR problem. And so, but the powder gangers are attacking Good Springs. They're attacking Prim, and the NCR won't lift a finger to help either of those settlements because they are not within the jurisdiction of the NCR. And the powder gangers are a problem that they literally created. It's very fascinating, just like how much the NCR is struggling and like all of the ways and just like it's in which it's really messed up. And I've been talking way too long. I'm sorry.
No apology necessary. And I think that does provide some helpful context for kind of framing this discussion of how different is the NCR from the Legion. I mean, obviously, on surface level, the NCR seems a lot better, right? And I would say that they are still better, but
Yeah.
they're still ruled by self-interest, right? And
Hmm.
that's kind of the point that you're making. And it's a large, complicated society where you have good actors, you have bad actors, but at the end of the day, it's concerned with self-interest, not necessarily the good of man. And it kind of raises a question of, okay, what exactly gives government, because I mean this is a kind of proto-governmental entity, like what gives government legitimacy versus a gang. In City of God, Augustine recounts the tale of a pirate who's captured by, oh, I think it was Alexander the Great, and and Alexander says to this pirate, what business do you have capturing ships at sea? And the pirate responds to Alexander saying that, you call me a pirate, basically I've got a small operation. Well, you've got a larger one, so people call you emperor. Like, what fundamentally is the
Right.
difference here? Um, and so, what is the difference between the NCR and some petty gang other than size? In that both are interested in their own people, potentially dividing up the spoils. You've got various levels of authority, but it all just comes down to self-interest. Only the NCR has some more guns at their side. And so, I mean, what makes them more legitimate than Caesar's Legion? I mean, I suppose that they aren't inherently evil, even if they're driven by self-interest. Whereas the Legion, I would say, is inherently evil, which is why you don't really have good actors in the Legion unless there's somebody I'm
No.
missing.
No, there are zero good actors in the Legion. Like again, it's just not even worth comparing the two in that way. I think I think the only thing the game really does is like it feels like the Legion is there to kind of like show like the wor kind of like to contrast against the worst parts of the NCR more than it is to show any virtues of the Legion itself.
Right. Because, I mean, at least if you give the NCR power, in the end, that it like you have reason to believe that there's some stability in the land. If everyone isn't getting violated, right? I mean, that they do to some degree just like, incorporate. Maybe I'm misremembering the ending, but I think if I remember correctly, they incorporate people into their midst rather than simply dominating them. But maybe I'm misremembering that.
Depending on, so I don't remember all of the ins and outs of the NCR details, but depending on how NCR heavy you go in your game, that is absolutely a direction you can do. Like you can
Hmm.
bring Prim into the jurisdiction of the NCR, for example. Now they won't like it. The people of Prim, they won't like it, but that is one way you can bring order into the city because their sheriff is dead and they need a new sheriff. So you can get a guy from the prison who was basically like an ex-sheriff. He like and he's got his issues and baggage. Like there's a reason why he's there, but he is an option. Or you could get the local robot and program him to be the sheriff. Or you could like go through all the steps of convincing the NCR why they should go into Prim. Okay, and then we're gonna sign here, 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 and here, and here, and here. All right. And now, congratulations, you're part of the NCR. Give us taxes. You've got a sheriff now. Like
Right.
there are options like that across the Mojave for that.
Well, let's see. What else do you have in your notes?
I was thinking about so the more on the subject of the NCR, I was thinking about kind of like the moral ambiguity, right? The moral quandary. So we talked a lot about like horrible things that NCR does. Like, oh, I'm just gonna kill this guy because I don't like him. We're gonna provoke these super mutants, to try and attack us so that we can justify war goals. So we've talked about some horrible stuff. There's actually lots of juicy, wonderful, like depressing nuance stuff when it comes to like, okay, what's the right answer here? And there's a really good one of the examples that's a really good microcosm of the quests in the game. Where did my notes go? I got to scroll up. There they are. There's a water quest, right? Okay. In the for the NCR. So they have all these farms. The NCR has all these farms basically to, you know, feed their operations. The farms are not, they're not for the local people. It's NCR property only. All of that food, all of that water goes to NCR stuff, not to any of the people in Freeside who are literally on the other side of the wall, just like scrounging their existence for one more day. Excuse me. Um, so what happens is we have this really interesting scenario. The NCR have got like all these water pipes set up to get water around for all of their farms. There are in Freeside, I think, there are kind of like some people who have taken the initiative, right, to you know, siphon some of that water from the pipes, that is, that's not their property, like strictly speaking, as the NCR sees it. They so like we got some Freeside people who are siphoning some of that water for their own kind of little farm so that they can have some food and they can have some water. We've got like a moral conundrum here. We have these people who are obviously in need, who don't have, any other easy means of supporting themselves, and they're taking water, it's not theirs. They're stealing. That's, there's really no two ways about it. They're stealing the water, right? For a farm that they need, that they're trying to maintain. So what do you do? What do you do in that situation? Do you show mercy to these people? Do you show and just like, and let them keep siphoning that water from the NCR farms? But it's more complicated than that, okay? Because there was an NCR soldier, just an average Joe, who was like, hey, I've noticed that we're not getting as much water to our farms as we're supposed to. I'm gonna go see what's going on with this. He disappears. You do this quest, you find out, in the midst of this water quest, you find out that that soldier turned up dead. And it was one of the Freesiders who's trying to run this farm that did it. And now it's gotten like really hairy, hasn't it? Right? Do we still show mercy to these do we show mercy still to the Freesiders and cover up a murder so that they can have their own little farm and their own little means of supporting themselves? Now because we're not just looking the other way for water. We're looking for the other way for murder. If you do that, if you do that, the NCR farms struggle because they're not getting all of the water that they were promised. And all of the NCR farmers, like, by the end of the game, they will start packing up and leaving because either they're getting fired or the prospect of getting fired because they're not meeting quota, because they're not getting the water that they were promised to begin with to grow all the crops that they need for the NCR operations. So no matter what you choose, someone is going to suffer. Like, someone is not getting the water they need. Someone is not getting the food they need. And the question is it the NCR people and it's not their fault? You know, or are you gonna like, stick it to the Freesiders because, they are stealing the water and they did murder that guy, but then now they don't have that farm or that water and they're in a really tight spot. And that's not really fair to the people in Freeside who are depending on that farm. And that's like a microcosm of the moral conundrum in all of the quests of New Vegas. And that's one of the things that makes this game just like kind of like so deep and so great. You have this really uncomfortable quandary. And it's like, and everybody can come to that and they will have a different answer on what they think justice is.
Yeah, I think that's a great scenario to consider. And, at first, as you're telling me this, the part of me that very much affirms and celebrates property rights, right? The free market capitalist side of me, wants to say that, yeah, stealing is bad. But at the same
Yes.
time, Uh, Aquinas even says, Thomas Aquinas says that, when it comes to like basic needs for survival, in this case, he would say that, well, siphoning the water might not actually be stealing because the value, like the basic value of human life, trumps property rights is his
Hmm.
position.
Yeah.
And so, at that point, like if you are starving, like literally starving, then taking food that otherwise wouldn't belong to you. Well, in this case, it does belong to you because like your basic human dignity, your value
Yeah.
stands above property rights.
Yes.
Now, at the same time, well, once we throw murder in there, well, that
Hmm.
changes the calculus a little bit because
Yeah.
now, like, we're siphoning water. I mean, to people who don't value human life, to the point where they are elevating their needs even above the basic human life of this NCR guy, and so that does complicate things a little bit. And like you said, like now that's going to put a undue strain on the NCR farmers, and so it's a difficult situation there. I mean, take the murder out of it. I might side with the Freesiders, right?
Hmm.
Add the murder dynamic, and well, I don't know. It's not quite so easy.
Yeah, yeah. It's very like I think of the and as you were talking like about as you were talking about Aquinas, I was thinking about the passage in Leviticus where like like kind of like the moral like the moral law section where it's like there is provision for the poor where when you're gathering in your fields any like don't gather around the edges and anything that falls to the ground also during gathering you leave that there as well and the reason why that's there is because within the Levitical law, within the law that God gave to his people, this was the provision and the safety net for the poor and the disenfranchised. The people who the people who didn't have, means to support themselves, the people who like, for the people who were hungry, for the people, who didn't have enough. You had this law to basically like, hey, you like, save some of this for save some of this for the poor, like, and and especially to our modern sensibilities, there's a certain offense to that because if you were to calculate like, not harvesting the edges of your farm field, right? And you do the percentages, whatever, that's a pretty hefty percentage that you're sacrificing every single year. But like, here, kind of like the letter and the spirit of the law is, you know, this is to help the poor because I want you to help the poor. Now the NCR is obviously the NCR is obviously not doing that. They have, they have no interest in doing that. We can say that is, an indictment against them. On the, and on the other hand, um, again, we have the murder situation that instantly just kind of like, that's kind of like, the fly in the soup right there. But like at the same time, you're still gonna have like, all the free, you're gonna because it's kind of the fault of this one guy, and all the other freesiders are going to suffer, because of this consequence, and they're gonna be right back where they started. It's just there's nothing about this situation that is nice in the slightest. You can also make the case that the NCR shouldn't even be here in the first place. The only reason they are there is because they want the energy from the dam. But they are spread so thin they can barely afford to fund their operations, including their farming, and that's a punishment to the NCR farmers itself. That's something that's really just really fascinating to me about the game.
Yeah, that's a great point that there is no clear moral answer. It's you can justify either position, but at the end of the day, that some evil is going to be committed against somebody or some group of people, right, through
Hmm.
no fault of their own necessarily, and some good will be provided on the other side. And as you said, that is a pretty good microcosm of the kinds of decisions that you make throughout this game. That setting aside like the moral extremes of the Caesar's Legion stuff, right?
Yes.
For the most part, that you are navigating these very kind of real world type of political situations of how are we going to balance out resources amidst scarcity? How do we what kind of ethical principles are we going to bring to bear here? But end of the day, it's not super clear what the right course of action is, which is exactly what makes this game so compelling.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For sure, for sure. Um, what else do we have here? So we talked about kind of the moral conundrums of the game. We talked about kind of the NCR is chasing kind of like their kind of idealized image of an America gone by. Kaiser is chasing kind of like the idol of his perception of like a Rome that's gone by. We talked about the agriculture issue. Um, I absolutely loved that there is this oh like there actually is kind of like an adjacent-ish quest where you have to get agricultural data, like research data from a vault for growing more food faster. Do you know that quest that I'm talking about?
Is that the one with the plant people?
Yeah, that's the one with the plant people and the giant bugs. And it's like one of those things where yeah, the research went horribly wrong, and you can choose to destroy the information, or you can choose to keep the information and give it to the NCR. And when you give it to the NCR, you have like that hilarious line from the guy who's heading the project. He's this doctor who's this obviously this very self-interested man. Who's trying to just like climb up the rungs of the ladder within the NCR, and when you bring up any concerns over the project, he says like the juiciest line, which is, "We're the government. Like, have faith."
Right.
And it's like, oh, do I really trust this guy? Like, do I really trust this guy to actually like make good with this information? And like, because in the best of all possible worlds, somebody looks at the research data and says, "Oh, this is how it went wrong, so this is how we can do it better and hopefully not do that again." Or is the guy just gonna pass it along for somebody to make the same mistake again just so that he can get his brownie points, like his political brownie points? That's just kind of that's another example of just kind of that conundrum going on in the game. There's a really hilarious guy in the labs who was just as an aside, where he's talking about his interview process for getting his job. They asked him if he had a degree in theoretical physics, and he said he had a theoretical degree in physics, and that's how he got the job. That's super funny.
Yeah, that's funny. Uh, yeah, I don't have a whole lot to philosophically comment on that, but I will say that I just appreciate all the zany stuff we get, especially through the vaults, regarding
Oh
like the
yeah.
various experiments and whatnot.
The vaults are one of the most memorable parts of the game. I have more. I remember a lot of the Fallout 3 vaults more clearly than I do the New Vegas vaults at the moment because it's been a hot minute. I definitely remember the Plant Man vault for sure. There was another one. It may have been part of the Water Quest. I don't remember. There was another vault where some guys got trapped inside a vault in New Vegas, and you could either like free them, and if you freed them, it would like irradiate the water, or if you left them to die, and they're pleading with you over the intercom, which just makes it rough and awful and just not pleasant. But if you leave them to die, then the water stays clean. But if you let them go, then you're going to contaminate all the water and kill the farms. That's another not feel good, just like at all.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mentioned. Have you watched the show at all?
I did watch the show. Have
Not.
you watched the show?
I have watched the show. Okay, this is a side note. We won't spend too long on this, but
Sure, sure. That's
what are your thoughts based off your face there?
I enjoyed the show. Okay. I enjoyed the show. there's a good show in there. There really is. It's not as good as people say it is. It mostly has to do it's got a lot of writing problems. It's got a lot of stuff that's just kind of like weirdly written or poorly written. Or there are some characters that some people like there are characters that people adore that I don't like and think are poorly written. That's just kind of to sum it up. On the whole, it's a fun show to watch. It's got problems. Uh but it was a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun, kooky spirit of the spirit of Fallout is very much present in the show.
Yeah, and that later on, after we get to four, I do want to have an episode on the show in particular, which I agree, it's not necessarily like a great piece of art per se, but as you said, I feel like it does a good job of capturing the spirit of Fallout, conveying the world of Fallout. I feel like that's where it really excels for me. But in
Hmm.
particular, what made me just think of the show and throw that in here is
Sure.
that
Yeah.
one scene where all the different corporations and whatnot are throwing out the different ideas for the vaults. I don't know, I just found that scene kind of
Oh yeah, that
humorous, where
was
they're
real.
just like,
That was yeah, I remember that. That was great. I and that's kind of that's kind of like one of the examples of just kind of you have kind of like just like these really greedy, self-serving, corporations. They're not just selling a like a post-apocalyptic service for the survival of the human race. They want to turn everything into a social experiment, and that's like it's just it's so messed up. Now the social experiments themselves, like the Fallout series, they always have fun with it. They always have like the kookiest, goofiest, fun ideas for kind of like the social experiments for these vaults. But when you actually sit down and seriously look at what's going on, it's so messed up. Like just what they're doing to these people.
and a lot of it's just nonsensical. Like sometimes you wonder like, what is the good that could have come out of this? um, but well, maybe that kind of brings us to a broader question of, if you had to narrow it, what would you say is the message of Fallout?
Oh boy.
I
Oh
mean,
boy.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
We might keep we like I don't know, like we like I don't know. We might be getting into the spicy territory here.
That's
Um,
fine.
I think there's, and like we can also like like everyone's got their own opinions on this. I certainly have my opinions. Um, I think however you view it, there's no getting around like Fallout in general is itself very much a satire of of basically like American jingoism, kind of like very it's very much it's very much satirizing it's satirizing patriotism, it's satirizing American capitalism. There's definitely a lot of jingoistic stuff which is kind of like played for laughs. When you have like in the opening cutscene for Fallout 1, where you have like the news TV, it's like a US annexes Canada, and you have the American soldier like execute the Canadian civilian in the street, and then he looks at the camera and he waves. Like, so like they do it in a very like tongue-in-cheek way, but there's a lot of commentary on like American culture and kind of like the Red Scare and kind of like the seriousness, like the or the degree, the extreme degree to which we took that to kind of like kind of protect our ideas, our values, our interests from threats, both real and also perceived.
Yeah, there's obviously that strong focus on propaganda. And to be fair, that in the Fallout alternate timeline, communist China provides a very real threat, right? They even
Yeah.
invade Alaska, and like, they're a
Mhm.
very real threat. Um, but a lot of times in the Reddit forums or wherever, people say that Fallout is primarily a critique of like, Americanism or maybe even capitalism, and that may be there. But the way I see it, you know,
Definitely kind of like an extreme Americanism.
right. It's really, I would say, it's a critique of this fundamental like idealism or like exuberant optimism about the future and our unbridled potential. And, well, that does get manifested through nationalism. And it's worth
Hmm.
noting that these games
Yeah.
take place in America. So we only really see the American perspective, at least primarily. But
That was the point of the creators. Like the point, like they weren't interested in looking at the rest of the world. It was all through, they weren't interested in world building in that sense, like literally world
right.
building. It was like, their intention was like we are looking at like we are looking kind of like America through this lens in a very specific place in a very specific time, and like the idea that that kind of jingoistic nationalism and like kind of like leads to kind of like this outcome, basically.
Right. In fact, maybe to bring us back to Hegel, it's kind of a critique of this Hegelian nationalism that like we are the definitive future, right? That the we are what progress means. It's the progression of us as we reflect upon ourselves. Like that's what progress is. That's where
Mhm.
world history is moving toward. And, I think that it's worth focusing in on that slogan or that tagline that's associated with Fallout, the, war never changes,
Hmm.
right? It's this idea that no matter what we get, what kind of nice stuff we get with technology, with unbridled capitalism, like that can produce a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
maybe even is good, but
Yeah.
it's not going to change fundamental human nature.
No.
It's just going to give us bigger and more powerful weapons to smack each other with.
Hmm.
And that becomes increasingly dangerous as technology increases, as we move forward into and maybe even beyond the atomic age. Like things just become more dangerous. And so while we have all these visions of utopia and unbridled progress and the inevitability of the golden age that, the descendants of the scientific revolution will usher in, end of the day, people are people. Like we're
Hmm.
still the same basic people that smack each other with rocks and clubs. We
Hmm.
just now have much bigger rocks and clubs. And so
Hmm.
I think on a more sophisticated level, I think that what Fallout is it's a reminder of this basic human nature that
Yes.
doesn't change. And I think that that is good. In fact, I would argue it's a
Yeah.
very conservative idea. I mean, I don't know exactly what the you know philosophies or the ideologies are of the writers of these games. I venture to say that I probably differ with them on a great number of topics. But end of the day, I think it's a very conservative idea to remind us that there is a basic human nature that the progress of society and technology is not going to fully overcome.
There's absolutely a lot of like however you look at it, there's absolutely a lot of themes and ideas that are themselves very universal, and everybody can take something away from it when it comes to like, this story as a commentary on the human condition. And I think that is something that is definitely absolutely present. I was actually thinking about like I had two thoughts. You mentioned like scientific process. I want to put a pin in that because we can talk about that a little bit for old world blues. The other thing I wanted to mention, as kind of like you were talking about like human nature, which was I see a lot, like, so a lot of the old historians from like the last century or so, there was always this very very big idea about like the fall of civilizations comes from stems from kind of like a moral deficiency, right? Now I've seen some people, some scholars, some thinkers, depending on who you talk to, depending on who you ask, they kind of like scoff at that idea a little bit, that kind of like, moral failing doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the falls of like civilizations necessarily per se. I think there's a whole conversation that you could have there that could, you could just like go back and forth all day. That's not really what I'm here to talk about. What is interesting to me is that, and this was something that struck out to me because I was listening to a soundtrack about a year ago of like all of the songs that they have in Fallout 3. And an interesting thing I noticed about Fallout 3. So like one of the things about like Fallout as a whole, at the very least from 3 onward. 1 and 2 I think it's a little different. But at the very least from 3 onward, if 1 and 2 are not included in that, is there's kind of like this, regardless of whatever messages or themes that Fallout is trying to say about America itself, there is this there's kind of this interesting thing going on where you have, nevertheless, the people of the modern wasteland have a nostalgia for a day gone, for a golden age long gone, right? I always like, like nostalgia is just like a very powerful force. It's a very powerful theme in Fallout. Again, the NCR is chasing that nostalgia. Even Kaiser is chasing that nostalgia. He's chasing a different kind of nostalgia, but he's chasing, kind of like, that he's chasing the golden age of Rome. NCR is chasing the golden age of America. And all of the songs that they play on the radio are from, are kind of from the time when people, when America was, very much considered like a peak in its world power, like, in like in the 50s, in the 60s, I would say even like, the 90s, although there's nothing there's no 90s themes particularly. It's definitely like, but you got all this music from like the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. And so that's kind of like one way in which that nostalgia presents itself in the world of Fallout. But all of these songs in Fallout 3, I noticed a lot of them, and it's really funny. A lot of them were kind of like, celebrating in one form or another, what, people would call a moral degeneracy. Actually, and I thought, and that actually struck, when you put all of the songs in a line and listen to them one after the other without them being like on a mix, I found that really, really interesting. Where it's like, oh, this guy is celebrating his proclivities, and in this song, and then this other song is like, this guy is kind of, is celebrating, his vices. And this, there's a lot of songs that are kind of singing and celebrating vice, like actually in Fallout 3. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know how intentional that was or not. But there's, in either case, there's definitely like a theme there. Hey, this golden age that we're pining for, like, in the ashes of the civilization is a celebration of vice.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I hadn't really considered that, but I mean, thinking over some of the songs that show up on the radio, I mean, that definitely seems like a plausible theory or framing, that we're looking for this golden age he provided for us, despite the fact that we are not a golden age kind of people, right?
Mhm.
And you can't really achieve the external without the internal, at least in any
Mhm.
kind of really stable sort of way. And so we want stability while we're living pretty chaotic lives. That is interesting. I have to think more about that.
The other thing that I was thinking about, so we're coming back to, old world blues, right? Where's my finger? I was trying to do a circle. Old world blues. You were talking about like the scientific stuff. Old world blues like poses a very, very poignant question about, so like, I guess very, very quickly, I guess for the benefit of listeners who don't know or don't remember, they need a refresher. So like, Old World Blues is the courier goes on an adventure. He winds up in this area called Big Mountain, which was abbreviated, MT, so it's called Big Empty, the Big Empty. And it's basically, the Big Empty was this, basically this think tank where the most brilliant minds in the world could, do their scientific experiments. The scientific experiments of these people got super duper out of hand. And one of the doctors basically, like, one of the doctors thought his colleagues were so morally repugnant that, like, okay, if these people leave the Big Empty, they are going to unleash untold devastation on the world in the name of progress. I've got to devise a way to trap them in here and keep them from leaving. Now, hilariously enough, his fears are well founded, but it doesn't come from his colleagues. It came from everybody else when the bombs fell. Ironically, all these characters survive as brains in a jar, as brains in jars, and there's this whole theme about how they've kind of like lost their humanity, and you can actually talk to all of these very crazy characters, and you help them in various ways, whether it's good or whether it's for good or not. You are helping each of these characters try to connect with their humanity that has been stripped from them over the last 200 years. But the character that you are opposed to in the beginning, this Dr. Mobius guy, he's kind of passed off as your antagonist, but you get to the end and you find out that, he was the guy who was trying to stop all of this horrible stuff from happening. And they do like this is basically the moment where your character goes full overpowered, you turn into a cyborg, they rip out your brain, they rip out your spine, they rip out your heart, and they replace it with like this technology that kind of keeps you going. And you can get all these body parts back. One of the hilarious things when you actually confront this Dr. Mobius guy, who was trying to save the world from his colleagues, he's like, "Well, yeah, you can have your brain back, but it's probably gonna not want to it's probably going to not want to come back to you." It's like, what? What the heck are you talking about? One of the hilarious, and I completely forgot about this. You have an argument with your own brain to get it back inside your head, and your brain is blaming you for everything that's ever happened to it. Like, man, if it wasn't for the decisions that you made, then we wouldn't have gotten shot in the head. And then you can argue back with your brain and say, listen, brain, you're a non-trivial reason why I make decisions in the first place. This is like the fact that I got shot in the head is not my fault. It's so funny. But the thing that Old World Blues, the poignant question that Old World Blues is asking is, like, when is scientific progress good? Like, when has it gone too far? That is the theme of Old World Blues there for New Vegas. And they have a lot of fun with it, but they're also posing a really interesting question about the nature of progress. When is progress good? When is it not? When have we crossed the line?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I forgot about much of this scenario. I really can't wait to go back and play it again. It's just so zany. But yes, the this question of, okay, when does science go too far? I mean, my principal source for this would be C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man, where he talks about, well, men without chest, which in this case would be the brain in a jar, right? This quite literally, you're missing a chest, or in That Hideous Strength, he does something similar. And really what it comes down to is our technology helping us to operate um, more in line with our nature or less in line with our nature? But even that isn't necessarily easy to answer. I mean, we could say that good medicine helps us to operate more in line with human nature um, by curing the things that would cause deformation, things that cause corruption, right? We heal diseases, we fix injuries. But I guess the question is, at what point are we stepping beyond nature? And that is not necessarily an easy question to answer. I mean, take for
No.
example, like, Elon Musk Neuralink stuff. Like,
Ugh.
I mean, I see people talking about how they literally like, couldn't do anything in life and now they can. And is
Mhm.
that restoration of something like basic human functioning, basic bodily functioning, is that a good thing? Well, it's hard to say that it's not, but at the same time, we can readily recognize the totally dystopian ways that this technology can go. And then the question can be asked, like, is the technology itself a good thing or not?
I mean, it's already kind of there. Like, I don't know, I don't know every single use case for like his neural chip stuff, but I do know it's ended badly for some of his human test subjects, where like either like it stops working or they have to take the chip out of the out of the person for one reason or another, and then they end up and then they end for at least one of these people, they they weren't just right back where they started, they were worse.
Yeah.
Like there has been there has been like some there's been like some really unfortunate stuff that's come out of it too. Like so like on theory on paper, right? The idea that we can use this technology to help people and restore people, like yeah, we can see like that's that's always a wonderful idea on paper like that you want to see, and then of course but then of course you are instantly on that tightrope. You are opening the floodgate to like all sorts of problems. And okay, where is the where is the line? When have we crossed it? When has it become problematic? In the here and now, it's in the here and now it's problematic because like some of these people that he has helped, that that he was helping initially, now like now they're hurting, or they're worse, or whatever. And as far as the rest of the chips, though, like keep it away from my brain. If it goes in my head, I don't want it.
And I mean, inevitably, that has to be where things are headed, where it begins with how do we restore what isn't working to now how do we enhance what is working, right? How
Hmm.
do we enhance healthy subjects? And like I just feel like that sort of thing, that sort of technology is only a matter of time, right?
Hmm.
And the most we can do is put on the brakes a little bit and say like, watch out by like reminding people of what it actually means to be human, that we are more than simply functionality. Like there's a deeper center to us.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's inevitably this is where technology is going to go. And of course, every once in a while, just recently, Musk, and obviously Musk is one of the central figures in this whole conversation, at least at this point in history.
Yes.
He said something about how, what if our primary purpose is to like, give the sun consciousness, which I don't even know what that means, but
I
like
think I remember you quoting that.
it sounds terribly dystopian.
It's yeah, it sounds really weird. I think we would have like I think we would have like a really good conversation on the cyberpunk genre. I love the
Hmm.
cyberpunk genre. The cyberpunk genre is the epitome of like the apple of Eden as techno or not the app, we all know it's not really an apple,
Right.
but like the fruit
Yeah.
of Eden as like as technology. That is at the heart of cyberpunk. That's we're kind of getting off topic here with that though, but that would be like that would be a good conversation.
Right. But I guess it's still kind of within the domain that we started with
Yes.
of how do we use technology to advance human nature versus how do we use technology to create human nature,
Hmm.
which can bring us back to some older conversations of like is there such a thing as a human essence, which of course I would say there is, but
Yes.
you go to postmodern leaders like Jean-Paul Sartre who says, well, no, we exist and then we create our essence out of the decisions that we make, and so these are two fundamentally different ways of viewing what humanity is.
Hmm. Well, I think we here at Mythic Mind are right, and those other people are silly, wrong doo-doo heads. And
Well,
that is my that is my discourse. Thank you for
and
coming to my TED Talk.
yes, and obviously that is correct because we
But
believe
there is
in
a
objective
conversation to be
reality.
had there. Like
Yes,
if only for the sake of the conversation itself.
right. Yeah, and I mean, really though, that's it's a dangerous position, and Lewis talks about this in Abolition of Man that if we say there's no such thing as human essence, there's just functionality, then at the end of the day, what we're going to get is not more freedom, right? We tend to think that as technology advances, well, more people will be free because more people will have limitations of disease and handicap and whatever. More these things will be cured and done away with. But in reality, more and more people will become dependent on the fewer and fewer people who happen to be in power, who happen to hold the reins on such technology, right? It's just like smartphones. Like, we give away a great deal of freedom the more that we depend on those who provide us with smartphones, right? And so it's
Mhm.
actually fewer and fewer people who end up with more and more power over time, while more and more people become dependent. And so it's not that
Mhm.
um, the proliferation of technology makes more people free. It actually, in the long run, makes more people dependent. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I don't. You don't have to comment on that anymore.
I
Well,
wish no I wish I wish I wish I was like more prepared to engage with that thought.
we're going a little
Um
bit beyond Fallout at this point.
no it's no yeah it's fine. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. I have a couple other things here if you're
Yeah,
willing, if we still have
sure,
the time.
sure.
Like I feel like we are doing a horrible, horrendous disservice to Fallout New Vegas. And I'm sure people have been screaming at us all this time with talking about the NCR and and the Legion and blah 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 blah. We have barely brought up Mr. House himself.
Correct.
All right. So, what do you think, Mr. Andrew Snyder, about Mr. House?
I mean,
The wizard in the tower, the wizard
f-
in the Wizard of Oz. Don't look, don't like, he's got the big green head on the screen. Don't pay attention to the little shriveled man in the coffin. You know.
well, you can get, I think, some kind of achievement or bonus if you eat him.
Oh my God. You know what? The cannibalism perk is a thing. I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, you get a bonus if you eat him or or if you eat Kaiser or some of the others. But anyways,
That's
that's
hilarious.
a little bit beside the point. That I actually, from what I can remember, I tend to prefer House over the alternatives, if for no other reason than the conservative in me wants to preserve something of the old world, which he definitely represents and kind of brings into this the wasteland. Um, Now, that's not a very nuanced view, and I don't remember a lot of particularities here. So maybe you can provide some direction or some thoughts here.
Um, So I am so I remember on my very first playthrough, and again I'm like 20 years like I was like 20 years old,
Yeah.
so this was like, this was a while ago. I am definitely not that age now. But I remember siding with Mr. House on the first playthrough. And the more I got to the conclusion of the main quest, the more I didn't enjoy it. And just like, like personally. Like, gameplay is one thing, right? We all do various whatever in these games, and that's all fun and awesome and dandy. Personally, I was not enjoying Mr. House very much by the end. Um, he's very much he's really not much different from anybody else in the wasteland. He is like, he is his own dictator. He does, if you are going to go along with his plan, he insists that there are people groups that you must wipe out, that you may not necessarily want to wipe out. The way he kind of like treats his own people. Like he like one of the vaults that's actually within New Vegas itself. Like he basically like evicted the entire population and filled the vault with concrete. Like completely flooded it with like solid with concrete so that they couldn't go back in the vault. Now, like there is some, I don't know, I don't remember all the history about Mr. House. Apparently, like there is some lore that was his vault, that he himself was in when the whole thing, when everything went down. Um, I do remember it was a gambling vault. The interesting thing about Mr. House is that he tolerates the vice of gambling within New Vegas. He sees it as a means to an end, but he's got the long-term goal of wanting to abolish gambling, which I think in and of itself is not a bad thing. But everything that he does to kind of achieve his own ends is itself very like uh, uh, dictatorial. Is that how you say that? Like dictatorial, oppressive. He's so like in that sense, he is very much kind of like the unchecked kind of like power hungry kind of libertarian tech bro
Yeah, that's fair.
that I personally find very distasteful. He's got some lovely ideas on paper. In practice, uh, I don't think he's a particularly lovely person or a beneficent ruler in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, he's definitely not a hero, but he
No.
he does provide, or at least arguably provides, the kind of law and order that we said was largely missing from the Legion that potentially
Hmm.
could have been there. Uh,
There is, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, that's basically it. That he's the law and order candidate, which, all things considered might not be good, but that itself could potentially be a good thing in an otherwise chaotic scenario.
There is an argument to be made, and people like one of the fun things about New Vegas is that people have been just as people have been spending the last 10 years passionately arguing Stormcloaker Empire. Uh, People have been spending the last 10, 15 years actually passionately arguing NCR, or like no one's really arguing Legion. Some people are unironically arguing Legion. I love you all. I just want to preface that, but that's just weird. I don't understand it. So realistically, people are saying NCR versus House versus independent, or independent, House is technically independent, but like independent where the courier is calling the shots, right? Those are realistically kind of like the three things that everyone's arguing. And like they've been doing it for years. No one's come out on top when it comes to that argument. And it's a testament to the writing of the game itself that it presents us with just kind of actually like these really interesting like quandrums and Socratic exercises for kind of like like this situation, like how, like what is the best situation going forward, kind of like for like the stability and the well-being of the people in this region in a post-apocalyptic world. And the fact that people feel so strongly about these topics, like shows that there is just there's kind of a relevance to these ideas that kind of like touches our souls almost. That is to New Vegas's credit, that we can have these conversations at all. Like that's one of the that's kind of like one of the strengths, as as art as a medium, as video games as a medium, and especially as fall like in particular, as Fallout New Vegas as a piece of interactive art, and storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. And so where do you land? Who should control Vegas?
Oh my gosh. It's one of those things where I don't think there is a right answer. Once upon a time, like a very young me would have said, like, oh, maybe House, but then I very quickly I was very quickly house pilled until I was very quickly not house pilled, like within the same playthrough. I feel like independence is a lovely idea on paper, assuming you can maintain your own order and stability. Because like even if it's just you, even if it's just you, you are still kind of like dispensing order because you take control of House's robot army, that he uses for like protection and defense, and the like dispensing and maintaining of order and justice. So it's not like there's like there's it's not like there's a big it's not like there's a big change there in that regard. You have the resources. You are holding the resources. You are holding the cards. The question is, can you play the cards? Right? And I think that answer is up to the individual player. But from a realistic standpoint, I think the answer to that question is almost beyond the scope of the game to fully answer, and kind of like with any kind of justified or with any kind of justification or satisfaction. There is, there is a case to be made that there is no long-term stability to be had in independence, and that includes even with House, because of what the Hoover Dam itself provides in a post-apocalyptic world where resources are so scarce. The fact of the matter is that, whether you push people out, even if it's just for a little bit, they want the dam. they're going to come back. Like, if it, even, it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but what happens when, like, in the next 10 or 15, 20 years, NCR decides, round two for the dam, here we are. What if Caesar's Legion comes back, or some other huge tribal power, or some other power within the game? What happens when they come back? And then we're right back where we started. Like, New Vegas in Fallout is just kind of in the undesirable situation of being like the piece that everybody wants on the board. And I think that to that end, I don't think the NCR is like, like, again, not even bringing any real world analogs into it. Okay. Like, not even bringing real world stuff, real world politics, real world America into it. Just judging the game and the pol and the political powers and all the characters in the story on their own merits, which can be done because this game is well written enough that this story stands on its own merits without necessarily those outside influences. Um, like, the NCR is not great, but there is a case to be made that if anyone's going to have the dam, we're probably better off with it being the NCR than some other power. Certainly Caesar's Legion.
Yeah, I mean, not obviously NCR is preferable to the Legion. I think
That's a,
that
that's a low bar, though.
yes, that's the obvious one. I mean, I feel like in this sort of chaotic environment, I mean, this is when you need a strong leader, and it seems like the NCR is just not capable of providing that in any kind of stable long-term scenario.
Yeah.
And so that's why I would say either House or
Hmm.
kind of Courier-led Vegas
Sure.
that you just
That's valid.
you need a strong force. You need a strong central leader to provide that kind of order in a time of chaos and widespread violence.
You do have a giant robot army.
That is very
Like,
helpful.
nobody else, like nobody else has that robot army, and it's a pretty good robot army. So, I mean, you know, like, I
Yeah,
feel like, I think, I think most factions would think twice before fighting that robot army.
yeah, exactly. And so, moral of the story is if you want security, well, you should get a giant robot army.
There you go.
That's our
That's,
takeaway.
that's our New Vegas TED Talk.
Yeah.
Get yourself a giant robot army. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
All right.
Um, do we have time for one more, or do we want to call it?
All right, we can do one more, then we'll call it.
One more. All right. So one of the interesting things about, like, this, what a bummer. It's fine. So the Lonesome Road DLC. What do you remember about that?
Not a whole lot. I remember appreciating it at the time, but I just don't remember a whole lot about it.
Yeah, I don't remember all the ins and outs of it like I wish I did. The gist of Lonesome Road is it's the final DLC for the game, and it's supposed to be kind of like the culmination. In a lot of ways, it's the culmination of the story, and it's the culmination of all the other DLCs as well. One of the things that New Vegas did really, really well, was just like incredible writing, incredible in-depth faction system, um, but also just like incredible like attention to detail and connecting all these little threads and stories together all throughout the main story of New Vegas. You have hints here and there of like this rival that apparently your character has that's kind of stalking you in the shadows a little bit, but never really comes into the light. And the rival kind of like, like all of the characters across, Dead Money, Honest Hearts. Ooh, Honest Hearts, darn. You know what? It's fine. Sorry, Joshua Graham. Maybe next time. But like across all of the DLCs, there's actually a lot of overlap between all of those characters and all of the events that happen in the game that you just don't really see in a lot of stories. But Lonesome Road tries to tie all of that together. You have this character who is your rival, and his name is Ulysses. And this is the part where it's kind of weird. Lonesome Road basically tries to give the courier a backstory, and the backstory basically comes down to, well, Ulysses is basically calling to your character to come and have like a final confrontation with him, and he's really mad at you for some reason. He's mad at you for something that you apparently did. But the long story short is that back in your courier days, you delivered a package for by order of the NCR, and the package had some old world symbols on it, and it's implied that these are maybe like nuclear codes or something. They had these old world symbols on it. They didn't really know what they were, but they were trying to decipher them. They wanted to control it. They didn't want the Legion to have it, yada yada yada. You delivered you delivered this package to this place called the Divide. It was this town, this village, this city called the Divide. And your character apparent like it's hard to say how much your character knew. Apparently they didn't know a whole lot. But essentially what happened was when your character delivered this package to this NCR research facility at the Divide, it activated there was a bunch of missile silos at the Divide. This package activated all of the missiles in the missile silos, and the missiles detonated inside the silos and destroyed the city, and then also created an earthquake. Because I think the reason why it's called the Divide is because it's on the fault line. So basically, you inadvertently destroyed this town. Ulysses is, and I wish we had more time for this. I wish we could do this more justice. So this might be better off for your Fallout series. This might be a better question to ask for your Fallout series, but I'm going to do it now anyway, and we can come back to that. We can come back to it later. But there's a lot of the final boss of Lonesome Road is you basically having a big fat philosophical debate with Ulysses. And he talks about a lot of things, but one of the things he does is that he holds you personally responsible for delivering that package, even though nobody really seems to know what the package was or what it did. So I guess one of the questions that I was going to ask you, basically, from a point of philosophy, when it comes to blame in a situation like when it comes to blame, when it comes to fault, like in a situation like that, we're arguing butterfly effect here, right? So I guess my question was to you as a teacher of philosophy, what would how would the various Greek philosophers, how might they like address that issue of who's at fault, who is to blame? Or maybe one of your favorites, like, Lewis or Kierkegaard or somebody. Like, what would these various philosophers have to say on the issue of the butterfly effect and who's at fault in a situation like this?
I mean, the reality is that in any particular situation, all you can do is act in virtue in accordance to the knowledge that you have or that
Yes.
you can reasonably have, right? I
Yes.
mean, ignorance itself is sometimes culpable, but as far
Hmm.
as what is reasonable for you to know in that occasion, well, you act within those parameters to decide like what is most likely the good course of action here. And
Hmm.
um, you know, Aristotle would say that ultimately virtue comes down to figuring out like what is the right action in this particular situation. And for the courier in this case, I mean, if he doesn't really know what's happening, then
Hmm.
he ultimately is not culpable for whatever
Yeah.
might transpire, right?
Hmm.
And so now, remind me, where does this detonator or this package, where does it originally come from?
Um, it's not. I don't remember the details. It's
Sure.
not clear. It's not clear. Like you like like there's a whole debate that goes with it. Ulysses is making the argument that the courier was culpable in his ignorance. But you can also like one of the arguments that you can make to him, if I remember correctly, I might be getting something wrong, but if I remember correctly, one of the arguments that you can give to Ulysses is that if anything, like the NCR is at fault for the negligence. or like they share more of the blame for negligence for dealing with such a dangerous package, that they just so desperately had to have, and maybe not necessarily use so much. It's one of those things where, like, you know, uh, uh, we would probably do more justice to this conversation playing the DLC, and also like having kind of like the text document of Ulysses' monologue, basically his big long monologue, and kind of analyzing kind of like his arguments and what he is saying. But I thought I would just like throw it out there and say, like, oh, like what would Socrates say in this situation? What would Aristotle think about this in this situation? What would, whatever. And I just wanted to see what you would say.
Yeah, and so based
With
off, yeah, how it's been framed and what I
hmm
remember, it really just comes
I
down
haven't
to,
given you much to go on. I
yeah,
do
exactly.
apologize.
No,
This is
no,
what
no, no.
happens. This is what happens when you're like, you're coming to the end and you're trying to like scramble to fill out your little notepad.
No, no, yeah, I'm sure that there's more nuance than we're providing it here.
Sure.
And so, yeah, maybe I'll
I mean,
save this
broadly speaking,
discussion.
you and I are in agreement.
Yes.
Like, basically, like, as to the issue, which is why I was trying to frame it with, oh, what would the Greeks have said, right?
Right. And it still really comes down to the same basic issue of you can
Hmm.
only act in accordance with the knowledge that you have.
Yeah.
And so you can be virtuous even if your act of virtue leads to bad consequences because
Hmm.
you don't have access to, the broader scope of history and, where the dominoes are going to lead eventually. All you know is, well, I mean, maybe I'll quote one of the great philosophers, Gandalf, and say,
There you go.
you can only you can only deal with the time that's provided to you, right? And
We're
so
cooking with gas now.
exactly, and so that is what it is. But yeah, I definitely look forward to getting into this and various other issues related to New Vegas once I refresh myself with a full
Yeah.
playthrough with the intention of doing this sort of analysis along the way. I think there's a lot there. Just need a refresher.
Hmm.
All right. Well, we've been going for almost a couple hours now. I'm very impressed. I appreciate all the notes and questions and framings that you've brought into this. I definitely would not have been able to go that long off the top of my head without that. So I definitely appreciate that.
My intention is to bring value to this. Like what, like, I mean, now whether or not our viewers, our listeners, or our partners on the show agree with that, I'm doing my best, guys.
Hey, anyone who's still listening by this point will recognize some value in the conversation. So good. I appreciate it. And next time we will get into Fallout 4. But I think this is a good place to go ahead and wrap it for now. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, partners, thank you for listening or watching over on YouTube. If you enjoy this, make sure that you do subscribe to my channel, my YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the Mythic Mind Games podcast so you can listen on the go. And I also welcome your support over on Patreon at patreon.com/mythicmind. If you want to participate in this community, you want to join some of these chats, you want to have full access to the Mythic Mind Discord server, or you just want to support what it is that we're doing, patreon.com/mythicmind. Any level of support is helpful, but obviously higher levels will get you some more perks. Next week over here, we'll be coming to you with Fallout 4, but the next thing to come out from Mythic Mind will be over on the main Mythic Mind podcast as we continue through our Narnia series. But that's it for now. Until next time, Godspeed.
To the town of our Freer rode a stranger one fine day. Hardly spoke to folks around him, didn't have too much to say.